Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of Seaweed Around the Clock. I'd like to go right ahead and introduce to you our keynote speaker for this session, Vaimua Muliava, Minister for Public Construction, Real Estate and Resources, Housing and Urban Planning, and for the public service sector, digital transformation, simplification of administration, and evaluation of public policies for the government of New Caledonia. Vaimua, greetings.
Hello to everyone. Malo lele, malo katak, malo mau. Greetings and respect from New Caledonia, one of the many lands of Oceania, the blue continent of our planet. A third of the planet largely made of salt water, where life has always been a challenge, contrary to images of paradise. Why? Because the crucial elements for the survival of the human species are rare, water, and arable land. We, Pacific Islanders, have been alive in this part of the world for 3,500 years now, despite the fact of the colonial history has splitting our unity by putting us in Melanesia, Polynesia, Micronesia boxes, resulting from a European centric vision of our space, of our society. The truth is that our ancestors will not define themselves following their color, but following their ability and their necessity. We were defined by our clan, sea clan, and land clans. Why? Because our ancestors knew that their survival depended on the ability of some to skim the ocean, to discover the unknown spaces, and for others to keep the land and welcome those who arrive. Otherwise, we would already have died of hunger, have died certainly before hunger of physical and mental inbreeding. Ultimately, they knew that the ocean was not an end, but path that had to be cleaned so that the ocean would be the continuity of the land and therefore a source of life. The question of the balance of autonomy and interdependence is at the heart of our survival. It was true in the old days. It is true today. And whatever happened tomorrow, it will be true tomorrow. If the man who is talking to you is still alive, it's not thanks to modernity, but thanks to this cultural and identity heritage that makes me who I am. But unfortunately, this same man has lost much of the so-called traditional knowledge he had of his environment, of his detailed knowledge of his marine life. For example, today, I can only identify one or two algae species in my own language. Limu, which is still used as fertilizer of the land, and lomu, still used as food and at the same time as medicine. Because in the past, eating was healing. We ate to be healthy and not just to satisfy our basic need. This is why I would like to sincerely thank the organizers of this event and all the people who allow the man that I am and the Pacific Islander to recover the full potential of the opportunities offered by our Mother Ocean. This will certainly help us beyond healing the wounds of history to better respect our marine heritage, not to recover what was, what has been, but to rediscover the potential offered by algae for our identity, but also for our survival by developing an economic sector of the future that will enable us to ensure local economic development adapted to our geographical, cultural, and human environment. You understand, I'm talking about economic development in tribes and villages in remote areas. Now let's talk about digital and technological innovation. For those who don't know New Caledonia is at a dead end today. The protein-form crisis that hit us, political crisis, health crisis with the COVID, economic, and soon a social crisis with the Ukraine crisis and the exogenous inflation remind us that we live in an archipelago with a counter economy fed on French aid and financial transfers, which has maintained us in an artificial comfort. New Caledonia has an economy mainly focused on the exploitation of nickel, an aberration in such a small territory of 18,555 square kilometers with a population of only 250,000 inhabitants. We have 3 nickel factories in such a small territory. An economy focused on buildings and public services, which represents a third of the assets. The concept and development tools implemented here are drawn from countries of 60 million inhabitants. Mass logic has been applied here instead of quality, instead of performance. Today, New Caledonia must rethink itself as a Pacific island by adopting a model seeking food self-sufficiency, local production, while taking care not to cut off from the world. And in this search of economic diversification and culturally adapted to our ecosystem, the seaweed is interesting crop for farmers far from economic and industrial centers because it requires only a few cheap inputs, ropes and wooden pegs, plastic ties, and the plant to the ropes and a place to dry them. Low initial investment and only 45 days from planting to harvest. An ideal cultural development for those who have a few other income opportunities. Unfortunately, climate change is disrupting this sustainability of this culture because as seaweed production moves to deeper and cooler waters, it involves the use of boats and larger investment. A sustainable industry is possible, but the whole system must be transformed by rapidly learning the lesson from the banana industry. Smallholders, algae growers must be able to replant genetically diverse and biosecure seedlings. This means creating biobanks to maintain genetic diversity and select improved cultivars. It is therefore necessary to look for the places where genetic diversity exists in nature and to find how to reproduce it. This therefore implies a broader effort to understand who exactly the producers of algae are and what economic and environmental risks they can face. This is to encourage the development of alternative seaweed projects so that the producers are not solely dependent on prices, volatility, and can make longer-term investment that allow them to manage their risk in a sustainable way. And that means emphasizing the traceability of seaweed projects using mechanisms such as blockchain to recognize and reward sustainable, inclusive, and seaweed production strategy. It is an ambitious but essential and crucial program if the global seaweed industry is to realize its considerable potential. And New Caledonia, the Pacific Ocean, Oceania, could be the breeding ground for this experimentation. What about algae in New Caledonia? Microalgae. There will be between 7,000 and 15 species of macroalgae in the world. In New Caledonia, the first estimation bring this number to more than 600 species to date, largely unexploited, although widely studied by the Institute Research of Development in New Caledonia. We only have an exception. We produce sea salt with seaweed in the northern province of New Caledonia. I want to describe all the projects, the studies in New Caledonia, but there's a lot of research, but not enough action. And we have also innovative business incubator to support and facilitate the emergence of all these projects. But I believe I have said everything, and you will have understood that I am one of those who think that we have church enough in New Caledonia, and that we must now launch into action because we no longer have a choice. Research is good and essential, but experimentation will allow us to reflect the image of our ancestors when on the shore, their eyes fixed on the horizon, they face the unknown species on boats that have improved their efficiency and have been appropriated. You will have understood that I'm talking about catamaran, the fastest boat in the world. So to end my talk, I would like to thank the organizers and all the people who work on algae, because we, the Pacific Islanders, we are the blue continent. But with true history, we lost and we forgot. And we forgot all the potential the ocean can bring for our development economy. So I would like to thank all of you. Thank for your work, for the research you put on this subject, because I think we, now the Pacific Islanders, we are the first destructors of our ocean. And all the hard work you've done on this subject will help us to heal our mind and to see our ocean like our ancestors look at this ocean with respect, humility, and the continuity of the land. Because our survival depends, as the old days, on our capacity to go and meet you wherever you are and to welcome you wherever you come from. And life in the Pacific Island is really fragile. So we need you. So thank you for all of that. And I wish you the best, because the best you can do, the best we will survive in this ocean. Pagkafita, ilahilan ito ako, ito, na ipapalangi, mai na I whenua ma tā pūre. Maro, kātat. Maro te aloanga te kotou whakatau ni upule aki ke whau aki te kotou mauri. I te temi aini, kua lele te temi, kua lele te masini, o maui te natua, maui te moana, kua hake te moana, te whera nei te matou mau I te moana. Ko iae, e whakawhitai rahi atu te koutou, e upaparani, a tamai, te aronga te koutou maue, ke aunga mai ke mātou, o hauwhaki te matou mauri. Koe la, e whainga kupu, wherma ke tuku atu, mai tuku whahai, o oku, o whea pei ina I te hina kutua ngā ane, o te Pasifika katoa, kia koutou ena, te aronga te koutou maue, maro, o whawhitai atu. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaimua, for that fantastic and thought-provoking keynote speech there. I think it's absolutely vital to remember how critical the ocean is for preservation of culture and support for coastal communities, particularly in New Caledonia, but all across the world. Such important areas and themes that you've touched on there that we all share in this global industry. And only by working together across the whole of the value chain for the seaweed industry and collaborating willingly and beginning to apply the new technologies after the research you mentioned and actually get to work, will we start to benefit from this brilliant and beneficial ocean resource. So again, Vaimua, thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward to speaking to you more soon. So hello, everyone else around the world, and welcome once again to this 5th session of Seaweed Around the Clock. We hope you've enjoyed the program so far and are looking forward to discussing another fascinating topic this hour, Gen Digital and how the next generation can impact the seaweed industry. My name is Fred Puckle-Hobbs. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Seagreen, based here in Singapore. And today I'm joined by 4 fantastic panelists to discuss how technology can be applied to support seaweed farming as it scales to maximize its full potential. The 4 I have with me today are Rachel Jensen, Chief Executive Officer of Luminous Water Technologies, Alistair Douglas, CEO of Each Mile, Katerina Petukova, Investment Director for Innovation and Sustainability Projects at CFC Global, and finally, Ewan McCash, CEO of Ocean Farmer. We're looking forward to diving right in on this topic, but before we do, a quick reminder to everybody that you can ask questions and engage with the panelists and speak to one another using the chat window on this forum and on this webinar. So let's dive right in. And I'd like to start by asking Ewan, especially after that great keynote there from Vaimua, with your background as an ocean farmer, what are some of the areas of the profession which you think could be made easier and more efficient by technology? Of course, where you are in Australia, there are multiple things going on at the moment. And I think from your perspective, you must have some pretty big upsides that you can see for leveraging this technology.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. For sure. So I'm a marine scientist and I've been farming for 16 years now. And as part of that farming journey, have ultimately founded and developed Ocean Farmer, which is a farm operations application. And really, what I can see, the benefits of technology and the learnings we can take to seaweed from my area of ocean farming, which is oyster farming, is understanding the reality of farming day to day and ocean farms being underwater. So you can't walk that farm. There's a lot of learning that goes involved and a lot of learning that goes into understanding how you can farm in certain areas. One of the key aspects of what we're doing with Ocean Farmer and the benefits to take seaweed is actually digitizing that farm practice. So every farmer, this is what my experience over farming for many years, learns to farm their particular patch. So every location in the water has unique challenges, and farmers are great at adapting and innovating what they do and how they set up their farm and how they operate to meet those challenges. The learnings I would say is that in terms of digitizing that farm practice means it's a whole lot easier to share that knowledge and scale operations. And I would say that's what I can see could be of great benefit for seaweed moving forward is that, you know, it is taking that knowledge. There's many farmers out there already doing the business that already have, you know, years and years of experience in how to grow, and we can use digital technology to actually lean into those farmers to help them grow their business, to have greater impact, to actually accelerate, you know, the production of seaweed and the benefits it can bring.
Nice. Yeah, I really kind of feel that element there of what you're talking about, getting farmers off the farm in some senses. I know that's a big part of what you talk about at Ocean Farmer, taking them out of the water and allowing the digital resources to kind of do some of that work for them. But that component of sharing is so important. And I think it's something that we see really critically in Southeast Asia and Australia nearby, of course, is this idea that we can share and learn the research that we're seeing in this space. Alistair, I want to throw that to you if I can. How does Ewan's experience in Australia compare to yours with Each Mile in Southeast Asia? I know, obviously, of course, Each Mile focuses more on the shrimp and fishing industries, but what can the seaweed industry learn from the use of technology in those sectors, and how can that help to develop this form of aquaculture?
I mean, I guess there's lots to learn in some respects, but there's also possibly a lot of things to be wary of as well, in terms of adopting the technologies that are out there at the moment. You know, I think one of the key things to understand is obviously in Southeast Asia aquaculture, there's a huge diversity of producers from artisanal, small scale, large scale operations. That can be extensive, semi-intensive, intensive and super intensive. And in terms of the production methods and suppliers, you know, there's an array of markets and customer types. So, you know, is the technology really designed for you? And, you know, I think, you know, with seaweed, obviously you're going to have a similar degree of diversity of species, locations and methods. So when you're looking at a technology, is it really something that you can use? I mean, there are a number of challenges with regards to the accessibility of the tech, economic and you know, connectivity challenges. Then there's capacity hurdles. Do they have the ability to pay for it even? Are there digital literacy challenges? And then the incentive issues, and you know, what's the return on investment for them by adopting this tech? And there's some general trust and perception issues too, in terms of you know, farm management application companies seem to be charging for what would be described as descriptive analytics. Some of them see them as just mining the data because they actually own the data. So something to be aware of that. Who owns the data when you're purchasing a technology, and how's it being used? And there is a perception that it's being used to refine algorithms. And that they're paying for an improvement on the product. So you really need to, as a seaweed farmer, look at the solution. Is it fit for purpose? And can you work more with the technology provider to make sure that the insights that it's providing are real and actionable? Because you know, there is a matter of control. You know, data may tell you to do A, B, or C, but if you can only do X, Y, and you know, Z or whatever, that's under your control, then there's a problem, and all you have really is a front row seat. So yeah, that's probably some of the advice that I can share with you from this side of the world.
Thank you very much, Alistair. I think it's a really good point that sometimes too much data can be a double-edged sword, and it's one that I think we can come back to in a minute. But firstly, I wanted to kind of jump to Rachel on that point, because you mentioned ways in which these services can benefit and can actually provide value to ocean farmers, whether they be seaweed or others. Rachel, as CEO of Luminous, is developing and is using new types of technology, which I think are really quite applicable to exactly what you're mentioning here. So Rachel, what type of services are you offering for ocean farmers? Could you share some of the insights perhaps from the partnership which you have with Mari and Seagreen indeed? How can digital sharing help the farmers benefit from what you do?
Well, I think the sort of fundamental difference of our offering isn't necessarily a technology. What we do is we're sequencing the microbiome in water. And in every drop of water, there's a million different microbes. So there's millions and billions and gazillions of microbes in water, and they form what we call the microbiome. And it's the microbiome itself that is forming the very foundation of health or disease, or what we call dysbiosis in water bodies. And to speak to the partnership that we have, a very exciting partnership that we have with Sea Green and MARI, is that we are going into the water and we can actually, I guess the key about de-risking seaweed is that most of the seaweed is grown out in open fields. Okay, so, and the problem with open water fields is that there is not a lot that we can do to influence the microbiome, to make the microbiome a little bit more robust, that can help support and fend off disease in the water. It's largely at the mercy of Mother Nature. But what we can do with microbiome analytics, we're basically reading the DNA in the water, and every body of water is going to have its own unique fingerprint. And what we can do to kind of excel very cheaply and affordably is to look at water body planning and make sure that the seaweed grown is started off in the right place. And we do this, as I mentioned, by sequencing. We use next-gen sequencing. We look at all of the microbes in the water. We create a panel. We look at imbalance ratios. We look at how many pathogens are in the water. So there's a lot that I can tell you about the water. I can tell you if the water is predisposed to a disease event in the coming near future, or if it has a really robust profile of beneficial bacteria in the water. And so we kind of use our sequencing tech to help steer the farmer towards the right starting point, so that he starts off at the right place and isn't inadvertently farming in an area, for example, that has runoff from nutrients, which sounds pretty good, but it's loaded with phosphorus and nitrogen. And those cause blooms, they cause overgrowth, which are really detrimental to the growth of seaweed because it increases turbidity in the water, it affects the oxygen levels, it's really quite bad. And so we can sort of steer the whole farming operation onto the right platform so that they start off right. And I think that that's kind of where our technology, quote unquote, comes into play.
Fascinating, Rachel. I mean, of course, I'm no biologist, I'm no marine scientist, but I think what you're talking about here is extremely high potential for all the different sectors of ocean farming.
So that's the partnership that we have going with Sea Green, and in extension to MARI is that Sea Green sent down one of their research scientists, their R&D director, I guess, and we took a number of different samples we took water that was surrounding some diseased seaweed. We took some water out in the open water column. We took some water that's in a bed of seaweed that's doing really well and growing vigorously. And all of those different points of water, the microbiome and all those different points are going to have a very different profile. So we can essentially be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, where a farmer goes out, they take a little bit of water, they send the water back to us, we sequence everything in the water, provide the report. Yep, this is a really great place for you to start farming, or actually this place is quite compromised, just move down the ways a little bit. So we can kind of, it's almost like landing a plane, like a little bit of a runway direction. And that's the exciting partnership that we have in place with Sea Green.
We're super excited about it too, Rachel. And I think, as I said, the applicability of this to all levels of farming is so important. And we're really glad that we're able to bring this to Indonesian seaweed farming communities, because at the moment they are very underserved in terms of technology. But I wanted to throw that back to Alistair briefly and just ask the question, given that this is all about data and visibility and the amount of different data that we're exposing about the type of farming area that these Indonesian farmers have, we can sometimes potentially provide a bit too much data in certain contexts, I feel, based on what you said earlier. So this double-edged sword of providing too much detail around a farming operation. And I know that in Indonesia, that's a particular concern for small farmers who might have concerns that their buyers might not want to buy their produce if they know too much about what's going on in the ocean. So perhaps you could speak to a little bit about what Ichmar's found in that area.
Yeah, I mean, people often talk about transparency. But I don't know too many people, too many companies that will welcome 100% transparency into their operations or their own lives for that matter. So how you handle access and permissions to the data, and like we talked about before, who owns it, are sort of critical. And what are the, as much as what are the return on investments and what are the incentives, you have to consider what the disincentives are as well. I talked about SaaS solutions, in the past, where if you've got a solution that's recording all your data in one place, it could reveal major or critical non-conformities to authorities that are performing an audit. And so you need to be aware of all of these sorts of challenges when you're selling a solution or building a solution in and around your operation. That's why Rachel Solutions sounds fantastic, because it's, site selection is absolutely critical. You've got to make sure you understand the limitations of the site, and then also what species is best to grow in that location. Certainly from a food safety perspective, with things like seaweed. For us at Each Mile, we've built solutions whereby the data producers own the data. And that's one of the useful things about blockchain, is that all the data is put onto a secure and immutable record. And so they have a claim of ownership. And we want to move in that direction, to have fully inclusive business models, because that way, when you monetize the data, all those people that have come together to, gather that data and have claim of ownership on that data can benefit from the monetization of that data. So that's one of the key things for us with blockchain technologies. The other thing is, the metadata and protecting that is also a challenge, but it's something that also can be used for storytelling and those sorts of things for the consumers further down the chain. I'll leave it there. I'll probably be waffling on too much.
So that's absolutely fascinating, and actually exactly the right sort of thing to be espousing around blockchain. Of course, the potential to share information and exchange here, and for everybody to benefit from that immutable record is enormous. Of course, with its downsides, as you mentioned, but this is all about using technology in the right way, I think. And to that note, I would ask Katerina, you are a blockchain enthusiast, as I understand it. And we know together that blockchain does allow us to exchange information and share learnings better. So service connectivity is something that's also very, very much increased through the use of this type of technology. But how will that help the emerging seaweed sectors? From your perspective, do you see this as a major opportunity for alternative investors to get involved in seaweed? And will blockchain help seaweed break into the mainstream, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely right. So first of all, think about blockchain and seaweed. In many well-established industries, you still don't have any blockchain technology used. But in seaweed, which, as you mentioned, is an emerging industry, you already have sea green and some other developments, which is amazing for me. So we are really innovative. We're at the front edge of innovation, I would say. And par excellence, blockchain means transparency. So we would expect that if we are more transparent, we are attracting more investors, and we can inject more cash, which is really highly desirable, especially from seaweed farmers. We understand that, but I think maybe we should highlight that for amateurs and seaweed fans who are watching us, not from the industry, that seaweed farms are basically family micro businesses in general. They are not fancy, big, effective, productive farms in beautiful places of the world, like where you can just eat avocado toast with your latte or something, So it's a very labor-intense business, a micro business. However, I'm asking myself, wouldn't that transparency bring too many alternative investors? Fred, we have discussed that already, and we have been laughing about that. I have this guilty pleasure of investment director. So in the evening, I, from time to time, look at Reddit thread, which is devoted to new investment ideas from retail investors. And that is really amazing. The name of the thread is genius. It's called new investment ideas, let's lose money with friends. So this is somehow what they're expecting from it. But anyway, there are a lot of people following, and there has been a lot of discussion on different possibilities and the investment opportunities in the seaweed sector. Wouldn't that bring a lot of volatility? When I'm thinking about that and I consider just discussions with my colleagues and like professionals from the sector, I would say many of us still need a course, something like Seaweed 101. So what about retail investors? Wouldn't that bring a lot of just cash injection, which would run away at the very first possibility? So for me, this is still a question to be discussed, and I would like to throw that at our community here. At the same time, I think another very important issue, maybe that the first to address, is that seaweed sector is still looking for its equilibrium in its seaweed market in many ways, especially if we think about pricing. So the idea of, let's say, retail price of seaweed or wholesale price of seaweed could be very different, and just a matter of also discussion, even in one geographical area, what to say about dispersed geographical areas all around the world. So yeah, blockchain, I think, can bring a lot of benefits, but we should really think, first of all, so we should maybe put, even in this situation, investors and those type of stakeholders to the end of the bus and think first about seaweed farmers. So that would be my opinion, although it may be a bit different from a normal investment director.
I mean, it's like any sector, isn't it? We do have to wait for things to stabilize to some degree. And of course, pricing and the economic realities of the seaweed industry are enormously important, in part because, as you've mentioned, there is so much volatility. And a big component of reducing that volatility, I'm sure you'd agree, is de-risking. So I could actually throw this back to Rachel briefly to talk a little bit about how Luminous technology potentially could, potentially maybe from an insurance perspective or through other technology and access to other products, help to de-risk the seaweed sector. And just since we're on the topic as well, we have a question for you, Rachel, which you might answer at the end, around the changing of the microbiome. So maybe you can answer that one at the end of this piece as well, just to advise how the microbiome does change in these open ocean fields as well.
Okay, so there was kind of 3 points that I thought were really interesting. Number one is transparency. Number two is pricing, and the third was grading. So one of our first ideas when I first, we first made this partnership with Sea Green and Mari Oceans was, how can we use microbiome analytics to help with the grading process of seaweed? And we can actually go in and evaluate protein levels. We can evaluate how good the seaweed is based on the disease profile and the profile of the water surrounding the seaweed at harvest. But it's actually kind of funny because we quite very quickly realized that we then would run into a transparency issue, which is, do farmers really want people to know all those things about their harvest? And do they really want to publish that information about their harvest? So that's kind of where we went with that. We could certainly make that information available, which would help buyers buy grade A, grade B, grade C type of seaweed. So that would be attractive to a buyer. But going back to the seaweed grower, I'm not sure that he would really want to advertise if he's got a subpar conditions. So as far as de-risking is concerned, I think that kind of goes back to site selection and the level of the profile of the microbiome that's in the water. And we can actually look at gene expression of the microbes in the water, and we can tell if any of those microbes are expressing antimicrobial resistant genes. And so from that, we can tell if they're farming in water that's being either washed through with that has some antimicrobial resistance, has some antibiotics in the water, or it's been flushed off of the land through runoff. So we can sort of certify against certain different circumstances. But the main sort of, I guess, de-risking offering that we bring is site selection, and helping people start off on the right foot. So, and that kind of helps insurers come in and say, okay, these guys are farming and they're farming in the right place. They've got a really good microbiome composition in the water. They're going to be producing a certain grade of seaweed. So it kind of helps from a scientific standpoint. Insurers come in and have some solid numbers that make them feel a little bit more comfortable about the insurability factor. The question was about how does the microbiome change? Is that the
Correct,
question?
yes. Yeah, so if you like, I can give you the full question. How does the microbiome change over time to a large or small extent? Will it be an issue if you selected a seaweed site today and then next year the microbiome changes?
So the microbiome is really, really interesting. I think I've said that before, but I'm going to tell you why right now. It's really cool because all of the microbes in the water are really sensitive to increasing temperature and increasing pH, so acidity. They're really sensitive to chemical factors. So you can influence the microbiome by sort of pressing these levers in the water of pH, salinity, et cetera, et cetera. So microbiome analytics are really powerful in a closed system where we have sort of more control over the water. As far as how the microbiome changes, it does change day to day. It doesn't change necessarily the key players, but what will change is gene expression, and you'll see different gene expressions through photosynthesis. So some of the, during the day, you'll have a higher rise of microbes that are photosynthesizing, and then during the night, you'll have a rise of a different profile of bacteria that are providing a different fundamental service to the water around it. And yes, there will be some drift in the water. There isn't going to be a way to control that really, but we absolutely, I should say, but we did a really interesting study. We actually looked at the microbiome in a remote coral atoll in the Indian Ocean, and it's called Chagos Archipelago. If anybody's ever been there, it's only open to sailboats. So it's only about 15 sailboats a year are allowed to go, but it's completely devoid of people. And we looked at the microbiome outside of the atoll and inside of the atoll, and they were completely different, and they were consistently completely different. So we haven't done extensive analytics in seaweed beds, but I would hazard a guess that the microbiome would be relatively consistent in a certain area and also relatively consistent in a different way in a different area.
Excellent. I mean, it certainly does. And I mean, the potential there is just limitless in some senses. I mean, we've only kind of scratched the surface in what we've discussed today. But I think certainly from a de-risking perspective, you're quite right. From an insurability standpoint, it's really important that we have a good baseline of understanding of the farm sites. But also, even if the microbiome does change, we can produce tests which can repeat the results, can see how things have changed. And I think that's a really powerful source of information.
I was just going to say that currents are relatively stable. They relatively move in the same direction globally and also locally. So I think that, you know, you could establish from a microbiological standpoint, a specific grow out area that's consistently good and is out of the way of potential runoff that runs down currents that are known. And also plastic pollution that comes off of land is quite considerable in Southeast Asia, and that breaks down and affects the water quality as well. So there's a lot of different things that you would want to avoid, and you can generally avoid those through understanding local currents.
For sure. So perhaps it's a good time to ask Ewan, for these kind of services, I'm sure that you see applications for exactly what Rachel's offering at Luminous, essentially for your farm or for farms in Australia. But do you think that it's something that's accessible to ocean farmers? Do you think it's something that's going to be sort of easily adopted amongst these groups? Of course, we've heard from Alistair, there are adoption challenges in Asia, in Southeast Asia. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on what this actually means for farmers. You're on mute, Ewan.
Thanks, Fred. So the biggest challenge ocean farmers face is access to capital, right? They operate the marine estate, and it's something you can't actually, you know, they have struggled to get access to funding because you actually can't use that as collateral. What that means is that any way we can create visibility of operations, we could capture the farmer's IP in terms of how they farm and what they do, and actually show how robust that is. The location IP, which but any way we can sort of use science, technology to actually create our operations more visible, to de-risk them. It's the only way the industry is truly going to scale, because if you look at other industries, primary industries, they've got land, or even fish, at least they have fish quotas, which is at a huge sort of catchment area to actually get return on investment on that. But from ocean farming, you know, we're going to have to rely on technologies like this to actually create visibility operations, create confidence in what we do, and scale up, you know, that. So there is I think it's important, and ultimately it can be made available to farmers of any size and scale. And it's going to be extremely important. It's going to be extremely important for the farmers to be more productive. It's going to be extremely important for investors to be able to invest in this industry, and ultimately just build a more sophisticated industry that can deliver great impact, great food, you know, on a global scale.
Absolutely, Ewan. And I think I'd just sort of probe further and ask, this is exactly what you guys are doing at Ocean Farmer, right? Bringing the data to the forefront, allowing farmers to actually present what they're doing on the ground to the buyers, to the investors, to the people providing the capital, right?
Correct. And I would say, back to Alistair's point, and one of the main aspects of Ocean Farmer, the application itself, is it needs to create value for the farmer. So it's not just about collecting data. It's actually a phone app that the farmers can use to actually collect, you know, navigate around their farms, recording information and assigning tasks. But it creates value at the farm level immediately. The beautiful thing about digital technology in this day and age is then we can do a whole lot of other stuff. So that smartphone they're carrying, it creates a lot of data and information, and it can integrate, and it's great at capturing that farm practice, sharing it with people, whether it's other employees, whether it's finance, whether it's investors, whether it's the supply chain for traceability. So, but it does start at the farm level in terms of capturing their digital practice, correct? And that's what Ocean Farmer does.
It's brilliant to see it in development as well, and we're really looking forward to the release of the next edition. So Alistair, just throwing it back to you briefly, I guess, because it'd be great to hear the perspective from Indonesia, from Southeast Asia, and understand how solutions like Ocean Farmer and indeed Each Mile and Seagreen can potentially scale across the millions of smallholders that we know exist in both the fishing and the other aquaculture sectors, including seaweed. So from your perspective, is that really possible?
Yeah, well, it's a real challenge. You know, at Each Mile, we're really dealing with solutions for traceability. Like I mentioned before, we talk about the data producers being the owners of the data, and putting the farmer at the center of your sort of world, if you like, is key to that. How are you helping the farmer? And how's the data helping the farmer? And how can the data give the farmer ownership in the solution, in the algorithms that are being developed? You know, and it's difficult to sell a SaaS solution, I think. So one of the things we've done is we've made, first of all, our solution is a user pay scenario. So when they use it, they pay for it. When they don't use it, they're not paying for it. And that's not really going to be the case with farm management applications. But one of the things we have also done is made the code open source. We've produced a protocol documentation for it. And we actually want the daughters of fishers and the sons of fish farmers, for example, to build solutions for their local communities, and we're going to help them do that. And then we actually share in the commission revenues with them. So they become part of our business model. And again, when data is monetized, they, along with the farmer, can also benefit from that. So I think ultimately we need to take these sorts of approaches to achieve, you know, truly inclusive business models. And, you know, I think we did discuss at some point consolidation, maybe not today, but in a previous conversation. And I don't think that's often the best outcome, certainly not for farmers. And, you know, I would like to see technology basically used to foster more cooperation, more coordination, and more collaboration and take more of an ecosystem-based approach. So you really think about what your purpose is, not so much, what your mission or your values are, but what actually is your purpose. And once you define that, you start to realize that all the shareholders in and around that purpose become material, that are material to that. You become aware of them, and how then can you cooperate with them and coordinate with them, and use technologies like blockchain together to achieve a common goal.
Yes, so it's almost more than just value add. It's all about shared value add and incentivization for people to do these things together, right? That's a really interesting point, Alistair. And I think, and it sort of extends into the kind of more macro level question around ecosystem services. And for this one, I think, Katerina, this could be one for you to answer, especially since it's blockchain involved. Do you see a potential for the kind of shared goal here to be enabled of environmental conservation and restoration, things like carbon sequestration, which we've heard so much about from a seaweed perspective? Do you think that this technology can be used in a way that will actually help meet that goal?
Thank you for asking that question to me, because it's the most delicate question, I think, in our industry. Yeah, so I would be the one to blame finally. But, I would invite definitely everyone to read a very, very interesting publication, which has been recently done. I think it's end of May, by some a group of Japanese scientists who actually tried to somehow unveil the real carbon capture and carbon sequestration within the seaweed industry. So they have done a lot of research in different farms, and I think 3 or 4 farms in Japan, and the results are very interesting. So the proof of concept has been done, but there are a lot of details out there which I would not really concentrate on now. But definitely seaweed is it's seen as a crucial part of blue economy, and the crucial issue when we're trying to address carbon mitigation. So I think that the first thing we should think about really, because this is still a bit doubtful, and I think we would bring this to this level of technology. It's too early to talk about that. But what could be really done, I think, a kind of marketplace, a kind of easy thing and highly desirable in the market. So for those seaweed farmers to have direct access to their customers. And here I think blockchain could be quite a solution. Who knows, maybe in several years on a platform like Seagreen, you can pay with crypto, with your Bitcoin for several tons of seaweed. Who knows, maybe that is a reality. But definitely seaweed is a kind of solution for water remediation, for carbon mitigation. But I don't think that here the issue is in blockchain. So if we manage to arrange that somehow to make it work, then blockchain could help and build up on that. I really like what everybody said in the session, and I especially relate to Alistair's point that we should think about benefit. It's not blockchain per se. It's really to think what this technology could bring, what it could build on, and to use it in the best way for every shareholder and stakeholder in that whole system.
Thank you for that very great final note there, Katerina. We have come to the end of our session, but to end on the point that the value is there for the communities and for all the stakeholders and shareholders involved is fantastic. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for their time today, for their fantastic views, to Katerina, Alistair, Rachel, and Ewan. And I'd like to remind everybody that all of our panelists will be available to speak to in the wider Seaweed Around the Clock session in the open auditorium. So look forward to the next session, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.